welcome to Survivorship in Charge of Your Own Health. My name is Nicole Owens, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Grit Health. I'm also a 4-year breast cancer survivor, coming up on 4 years of survivorship here in December. So I'm really honored to be with you guys today. Our session today, we're talking about survivorship and what that means to you. For the sake of our conversation today, we're posing survivorship as time after active treatment. But we'd love to hear from you. What does survivorship mean to you? If you can take a minute and comment in the chat about what survivorship means to you and where you are in your survivorship, that would be fantastic. So when we get diagnosed with cancer, the goal is to live, to survive, to enter survivorship. But we don't always necessarily think about what happens in survivorship when we're going through active treatment. I know for me, I rushed back to get to normal as soon as possible. But today's session, we're going to talk about how to empower you to be in charge of your own health. And I have 2 amazing speakers with me today. And I'm going to turn it over to them in just 1 second to introduce themselves. But we have Suzanne Stone from the Live Strong Foundation and Nikki Yule from the LLS, from Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Foundation. And I'll turn it over to Suzanne. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. It is great to be here this morning or this afternoon or tomorrow, depending on where you are on the globe today. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to connect with people from all over. It's great to see how many people are from different places and your stories. Thanks for sharing us on the chat. I have been in the nonprofit space for over 25 years. And for the last 6 or so, I've been focused on in the cancer arena. Prior to coming to Live Strong, I was the executive director of a Susan G. Komen affiliate in Central Texas. So had most of Central Texas. So for those of you in the chat, sharing your stories of breast cancer survivorship, I understand your journey. And then most recently, now I am with Live Strong. And the reason I joined Live Strong was because I'm very passionate about improving the quality of life for everybody every day. It's not about what's going to happen for you tomorrow. It's about today. When you wake up every day, how can we make your day great? And that's what I'm really focused on in my life, and kind of my mission is making life better every single day for everyone whose life is affected and touched by cancer. So thanks so much, Nicole and Grit Health, for having me today.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for being with us. I look forward to talking with you further today and, hearing your wonderful experience. So now I'll turn it over to Nikki. If you can share a little bit more about yourself and LLS and what you do. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I am also so excited to be here. I am a clinical oncology social worker by training, with about 25 years of experience with all kinds of cancers in my career, including towards the latter part of my career, blood cancers, bone marrow transplant, solid tumors, and I have a really passion and a special interest in adolescent young adult cancers and cancer programming. I did that for many, many years, and also underserved populations and health disparities. So the Latinx community in the San Antonio area was a really important part of my professional career there. I'm from Indiana, did my undergraduate at Purdue University, and then went south to be warm in Texas, at the University of Texas at Austin, right there where you're at, Suzanne, in Austin, and lived there for a little while. I'm now the director of the Information Resource Center at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Our national offices are out of Rye Brook, New York, and we are the largest nonprofit cancer organizations whose sole purpose is to find a cure for blood cancer. So we fund life-saving research throughout the globe, and we are about advocacy, access, and improving the quality of life of blood cancer patients. And I'm really, really passionate about that. So thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to learning more about all the folks that are here with us and connecting.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for being here today. So as survivors and caregivers, we know there are specific things at each stage of our cancer journey that we need at each unique time, and survivorship is no different. Can we start with Nikki? What do you see typically are the needs in survivorship with the people that you work with?
Wow, I think for survivorship, one of the things that happens throughout the cancer journey, but especially in survivorship, is taking charge of your care. We know that survivorship care plans, we know that knowing your treatment and what to expect going forward is really important. But I think with survivorship, there's this extra burden almost of taking that responsibility and taking charge of your own health that the patients take on. So I think about the emotional impact too, right? So we're transitioning from really aggressive treatment or intense treatment, or it, like you said, you're just surviving. You're going from appointment to appointment. You're busy. Your brain is a million different places. And then survivorship, there's this lull. There's this quietness, this stillness that happens where I think the emotional impact of what in the world just happened to me, right? The trauma of everything that you just experienced kind of starts to settle. And I think it's really, really critical in survivorship that we look at mental health and we look at anxiety and we look at trauma and we look at depression as we're entering into survivorship, because what your friends and what your family and what your doctors are going to tell you is high five and you should be so happy and now it's all done and great job. But not all survivors are going to feel that when they get into survivorship. So that's what I hear from the survivors that I talk to.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. And we're definitely going to talk about mental health a little more in depth later, but I'd love to hear from Suzanne from your perspective. What do people coming to Live Strong need in that phase of their journey in survivorship?
Oh, it's a lot, right? I was actually asked to write a list working with some really amazing entrepreneurs who come to me every day looking for ways to help the cancer community, which is so interesting to me. But somebody said, hey, could you write me a list of like the top 20 things that people come to you for? I'm like, 20? I need all day. Because it's not just, it is the big things, but it lives strong. And the things that I'm really focused on are the small things. It's the things like, I'm 19 years old. I got diagnosed with cancer, and wait, nobody told me about fertility. I didn't even think about that. You mean I can't have a baby now? Wait a minute, what? So fertility is a big one. We also, just this year, we've had over 90,000 people click on the article that says late effects of cancer treatment. And so you rang the bell and you were all finished, but Nikki, to your point, the journey has really just begun. So do you have neuropathy? Can you feel your fingers? Why can't I remember anything? Why is it that I'm still so tired? It's been over a year. I'm depressed. My family and friends and my relationships are permanently affected, and nothing seems the same. My hair came back a different texture. What the heck do I do with this? It's all the things. How do I eat? I want to walk my daughter down the aisle. Those are the kinds of, but I can't walk across the room, right? Those are the type of things that I think we have to solve when it comes to survivorship and when we talk about long-term effects and late-term effects. And that's something that I hope that anybody who's, a part of this conversation today, and if you're listening and I know you have friends, because you get diagnosed and suddenly people come out of the woodwork, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, my sister, my friend, I know somebody. Share with them that at the beginning of your journey, that's when you really need to start talking to your doctors, your friends, your caregivers about these things that are going to happen a year from now, because you can make some choices today that mitigate those late term effects.
Yeah, exactly. Let's dig into that topic a little bit more, because I think that's so important. When we're first diagnosed and we're about to enter treatment, everything's a whir, right? You're just going, like you said, you're just trying to survive. You don't necessarily stop and think, how is this going to impact me in a year? How is this going to impact my quality of life? How's this going to impact me day to day? Are there certain things you should be asking your doctor when you're first diagnosed, or having conversations with, or asking your family and friends to help remind you, so that you can set yourself up for as successful a survivorship as possible? So, Suzanne, why don't we go back to you?
Sure, I'll start it off, and then Nikki, you fill in the gaps of all the things. At Livestrong, and this is certainly not the only guide, right? There's lots of guides out there. But I want everybody here to know there is a guide that you can download for free on the Livestrong website. It's called, it's a guide. It's a digital guidebook and a planner. You can also get it from us. We'll send it to you just at our cost to recoup our costs. So when you jump up on livestrong.org, what we say is, and what I've said is, the chaos stops now because help starts here. You need to find your here. So what are those things? My therapist, I'm a big believer in mental health. My therapist says emotion hijacks logic. Can you imagine a more emotional moment in your life than that day you got diagnosed, right? That's emotion, and you are no longer thinking logically. And so my biggest piece would be, find those people who are a part of your circle that are maybe 1 or 2 steps out, not the husband and the spouse and the brother and the sister and the mom and the dad. You need a couple steps out, because you need somebody whose chaos isn't like yours, right? They love you, they care about you, but they can be the logic during your chaos. And you should be, in my opinion, allowed to be emotional. This is your time to be emotional. Be that way. Be an advocate for yourself by building your caregiver team. But to your point, Nicole, and we're kind of talking about survivorship, that caregiver team, as you probably all on this call know, changes over time. And you see, in the fundraising community, right? We talk about it in big words like attrition. But after your journey is over, some people don't want to talk about it anymore. Well, you look fine, you must be fine. And your friends and family move on to something else. And so I think it's important that, one, you need to build a care team at the very beginning that is filled with people who can be there at different stages for you. I think number 2, you need to ask your physicians about long-term effects. What is this drug going to do for me today? And how is this going to affect me in 5 years? Just because I'm not taking it doesn't mean that it's not doing something to my cardiac health or my lymph system that isn't going to be long-term. And Nicole, I know you've had experience with that personally. Whether you're on tamoxifen for the next 10 years, great drug, but what are those long-term effects? So I think every time you take a drug, every time you're prescribed something, write it down, but not just talk about, what is this doing for me today? You need to ask about, what is this doing to me in long term? So those are just a couple things. Sorry, I could go on forever.
No, please. And I think that's such an important point. You have to feel comfortable with your care team too, right? And it's okay to get a second opinion. It's okay to get a third opinion. When I was diagnosed, I was only stage 1. But it was because the grade of my tumor was so high. It was a grade 3. It was potentially aggressive. They suggested doing chemotherapy for me. And the first oncologist that I saw prescribed a really aggressive, treatment plan of TC or AC. And, I knew that those drugs could have come with long-term cardiac effects. So I pushed and said, really, are there any other options? And ended up, going to a second practice and ended up doing CMF, which long-term had a lot less effects. But, Nikki, I'd love to hear from you. What other things should we be considering at that point in time?
Yeah, well, I really want to echo the second opinion, and I think especially if you're someone that has a more rare cancer, any cancer, to seek a specialist, and that's different than a general practicing hematologist oncologist, but at least once see a specialist in your disease, maybe an NCI comprehensive cancer center. You might have to travel, but that opinion from someone that's all they see could change the outcome, the long-term outcome of your success. And sometimes you can see a specialist at a like an NCI cancer center or a comprehensive cancer center, but your care gets done locally, right? So you've got the captain who's the specialist and the expert, but your local physician is reducing the burden, the financial burden of traveling, and your labs and everything can be done locally. So really, 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 everybody should get a second opinion or third opinion. I think that's critical, especially for blood cancers. The other piece of this that gets woven into everything that both of you are saying is the financial impact. When you are first diagnosed, you are emotionally overwhelmed, and it's really hard to know what questions to ask. It's hard to know what you're supposed to ask, but I will tell you, financial toxicity is a real thing in cancer. And if you're in the United States, what is it? Over 40% of all personal bankruptcies in the US are caused by medical debt. This is huge. This devastates one illness can devastate families. So thinking about what is my deductible? Is this doctor in network? If I do see a specialist, right, is that I need to make sure that I'm being wise about cancer and my finances. And you need help with that. That's not something that all of us just know how to navigate the healthcare system. So talking to an oncology social worker or Livestrong or call LLS if you're a blood cancer patient, and we will walk you through that. But the mitigating the financial impact is really important up front. Fertility, extremely important. We touched on that. You have to have that before you start treatment. You have to have that information. You have a legal right to know whatever goes in your body, what are the short-term side effects and what are the long-term side effects, and what are my options, right, to preserve my fertility. And it's just super important. I know before when we were planning for this talk, I shared a story about being a social worker and helping a nurse one day. We had a young adult on the floor, and nobody had talked about sperm banking. Nobody had talked about fertility. And she calls me in my office and says, I've got the chemo ready, and they're walking down the hall to start chemo. And I said, no. And I literally ran out of my office, ran down the hall, and stopped the nurse from giving the chemo. And she says, you can do that. And I said, yes, we have an obligation to do this. Ask the doctor to come back and talk to this young man about risks and benefits and options before we start the chemotherapy. So anyone that's listening that's maybe at the beginning and newly diagnosed, please know that you can absolutely put the brakes on and ask for that information. So again, financial impact. I think about Triage Cancer as a really good resource for work. Whether it's a question about FMLA, time off of work. Do I have a short-term disability or a long-term disability? Most of us have never looked at that. If you were healthy and you were never sick, you don't even know what your deductible is on our insurance. Most of us have no clue. And then back to Suzanne's point about establishing a care system and establishing mobilizing your support system. And that's not just your immediate family who are also freaking out, but that may be a good friend that may not even live in the same state as you. But how do you delegate and how do you mobilize the support system so that there's some longevity there, right? That they'll be with you throughout that whole treatment. So, but that's a whole nother topic that I love, is mobilizing support systems. So.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, guys. We had a question in the chat going back to the financial issue. How do you explain gaps on your resume?
I think that's
Either
such,
you
yeah,
wanna-
that's such a great question.
Mhm.
I can take it for once, and then I'll throw it over to you, Nikki, for sure. But I think I've hired a lot of people, and I've interviewed for lots of jobs, as have many. I will say that the best thing you can do is be honest. You do not want to work again, this is Suzanne speaking. You don't want to work for somebody who doesn't understand your journey. If they don't hire you because of a gap in your resume, and you share with them why you had a gap, you do not want to work there. If they don't hire you because you went through cancer treatment and you took some time off for yourself to heal, that is not the place to go. So don't be afraid of just sharing the gap. And I don't know that you have to say on the resume, I was diagnosed with cancer. Just leave the gap. Maybe put it in your cover letter. If you get the interview, they're going to ask you, and then you can share. But I would be honest and upfront. Share with them how resilient you are, because you're in front of them asking for a job. Talk about your resilience. Share with them how you're able to take all of these things that are happening around you and succeed anyway. You're able to prioritize. You've learned how to navigate, to think on your feet. Use your experience as a positive and not a negative, and try to frame that, I would say, within yourself, in your own mind as well. Cancer sucks, and there's no way around that. But what you've done to get to where you are today, just on this call, is amazing. And you need to take credit for that for yourself. So on your resume, be proud of the gap. Be proud of the gap, and others will be too.
I think that's
Sorry,
great
not
advice.
opinionated.
That's great. That's a great advice. Now, if you're absolutely terrified of disclosing that, Cancer and Careers is a wonderful organization that has a whole section about writing a resume as a cancer survivor, and interviewing, and what your legal rights are, right? What can they ask me? What can they not ask me? And going back to that personal comfort level, right? I think, Suzanne, that was a great way to put it, is what happened to me during that gap has made me a better person. That's why I'm sitting in front of you, and let me tell you why. But some people, if they're not there yet, it is important to know your legal rights. So again, Cancer and Careers is a great website for you to look at, with great suggestions and templates too.
Awesome. See, this is why we invited you guys. You know what you're talking about. I love it. So let's help people to be as empowered as possible. Let's talk about what a survivorship plan is and why it's important to have one, and maybe how you could go about starting one if you don't have one yet. Nikki, would you like to start?
Yeah. So, wow. When we think about the basics of a survivorship care plan, I think about the Institute of Medicine making these recommendations all the way back in 2006, right? About how oncologists and physicians need to be providing cancer patients with some basic information that they can take forward. And let me make sure I don't miss anything. So important for you. If you were not given a survivorship care plan, ask for it, demand it, start it, get a template started. You need the type of cancer that you had, your staging, right? What stage was I? If you have details about the pathology, or what we call mutations, right? That's really important to know your mutations, because that can have an effect on what your risk of recurrence is later. Detailed treatment history, every chemotherapy drug, every targeted therapy drug that you've had, radiation, surgery, dates, breast cancer, your hormonal status, right? Really, are you ER, PR? You know, that's really important to know all of that information. And the other thing that's really important is surveillance. You know, how often do I need to come, right? How often are my appointments? Who's going to see me? Am I coming to you? Am I going to my PCP? And how often? And then the other piece of that survivorship care plan is healthy behaviors, right? Cancer prevention, healthy behaviors, cancer prevention, and emotional support. Like, how am I going to deal with all of this psychologically, emotionally, spiritually? We get through all that medical stuff and then we kind of forget, oh, gosh, you know, I've got to figure out how in the heck I'm going to deal with that. But that's the basics of a survivorship care plan.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I can't even improve on that, Nikki, in any way. But so I'm going to add a couple of little more specific things to kind of layer on top of what you're talking about. Some really interesting pieces that I've learned in my time. So if you have a head and neck cancer, so sometimes that means that you can't drive anymore, right? And while COVID is awful, it has brought us telemedicine. And when you talk about surveillance, Nikki, I think about head and neck cancers and our Livestrong family members and our cancer community that can't drive. They can't get there. I talk to people all the time who have that challenge. So be sure to ask your provider about the option of doing surveillance with telehealth, whether you're a head and neck cancer survivor or not, right? Ask about telehealth. There are a lot of opportunities for you to do that and stay safe, especially if you are still immune compromised or you're anxious about going. Another piece of your survivorship plan that I think is really important is understanding nutrition. That plays a big role. Nikki, you were talking, you talked about that, about prevention, right? And staying healthy and healthy lifestyles. So really understanding now, because your body's different now. It's not the same as it was, which means that now chocolate may not taste as good, although that would be awful. But you need, in my opinion, you need to know, right? What can I eat broccoli? What about this grapefruit thing? What's the deal with that? Like, there are interactions now with your body that may not be as amazing. So you want to understand nutrition specific to the cancer, to Nikki's point, to your cancer and the treatments you've had, and then exercise. That would be my other piece of your survivorship plan, exercise. If that means today I'm going to walk to the end of my sidewalk and I'm going to walk back, that's your exercise. There were a couple of questions in the chat really early on about Livestrong at the Y. And, we started that program with the Y years ago. And COVID, of course, has wrecked so many things. It's also wrecked that. But don't worry, our Livestrong at the Y instructors are so inventive. We have several who've come up with their own virtual versions. So, and it's free, which means you can just log on. How great is that? And all you have to have, like Denise, one of my favorite instructors, Denise Nugent, she's out of Wisconsin, and she just uses a hand towel. Your only supply for a workout is a hand towel. She has another one that's a book, and that's all you need is a book. So you don't have to have a gym. You don't have to have something complicated. There are people out there like Denise and others, right, who can provide you online exercise support, because you have to get moving. You can't sit on the couch. You have to get moving. You have to get your strength back. So I think that's a very big part of survivorship as well, is moving and exercise.
And I want to add real quick on the nutrition piece too. So there is a nonprofit section of the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. It's called Pearl Point, like a pearl necklace, pearlpoint.org. It's for all cancer types, but you can actually have a free one-on-one personalized consultation with our dietitian. Her name's Margaret. She's fantastic. This wouldn't be clinical. So, if you've got very specific clinical questions, she wouldn't be able to give you specific guidelines, but we also have meal plans. We've got a whole section on caregivers and survivorship for nutrition. But if you feel like you don't know where to start with nutrition, pearlpoint.org is fantastic for all cancer types.
I was just going to ask that, Nikki. Thank you for clarifying that it's for all cancer.
Yes.
Going back to Suzanne for 1 second. So I just have to echo how important exercise is. I was told by, one of my oncologists that exercising is as important as chemotherapy, as taking my tamoxifen every day. So I would love to hear more about that virtual Livestrong program. How can people get integrated with that?
Absolutely. So it's a little bit more challenging than it would have been in 2019.
Yes.
However, this is what you'll want to do, right? So you'll want to reach out to your local YMCA. And everybody is having different experiences depending on where you are in the country about levels of opening or not opening. Reach out to your local YMCA. And they usually have a healthy living coordinator. Some of those people have been laid off. So if your Y is open, whoever answers the phone can answer this question. You're going to ask them about the Livestrong at the Y program. What it will do for you, let's say it's, we all go back, we get a vaccine and we're all able to exercise with masks on or whatever again. What it will provide you is a free membership for the Y. And it's a 12-week program where you go with other cancer survivors. Your instructors are trained. We actually created this curriculum, exercise curriculum, years ago to figure out how to build up strength specifically in cancer survivors. So this is designed not just for beginner, these could be triathletes coming back, right? This could be anybody, but it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. So it's a 12-week program. And at the end of the program, the Y will give you a reduced membership to the Y if you choose to continue, which I really do hope that you will. But it's a really great program. And again, it does things like just allow you to walk your daughter down the aisle. We hear stories of things like, I just want to be able to go to my, my kid's graduation, or whatever it is. I just want to feel normal again. So that's how the program works. It's great. It is adaptable for every level. So just because you can't go outside and run doesn't mean this isn't a program for you. This program is like designed to get you walking and lifting a book, literally stretching. And it does wonders for your mental health as well. Not only are you going to get those endorphins flowing, but you're also going to meet other people who are just like you. They're in the same spot. And there's a lot of power in that, when you get to, especially today, even when I just get to see you guys on the screen, you get to feed from people and say, man, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one going through this. Wow, you have that too. Your feet are swollen too. Can you feel your fingers? Can anybody on the screen feel their fingers? Like that's a thing. So, or like, look, I got my hair in a ponytail. Like it's those little successes that you get to celebrate together at the Y. So jump onto your website, but I would make a phone call today to your Y and get connected.
Awesome. I did a program here locally in Syracuse called Lori's Hope, which was a shorter version of the Livestrong program. And I have to tell you, as a breast cancer survivor, they had modifications for, stretching out my pec muscles and doing things to be, mindful of that. So it really is a wonderful program to check out your local Y. So let's talk about the survivorship plan, as a whole. There's so many components to it. What are some resources that exist for people to start building those? You mentioned a plan earlier, Suzanne. Where can people find that?
Sure, you can. I think Jess put it in the chat a little earlier. So for our plan, you can go to livestrong.org. You'll see the button that says Help Starts Here, and just click on that. And then you'll see a link that says Guide Me, guidebook, and go there. Go there, click on the guidebook. It's going to ask you for your name and your email address. That's just because once you do that, you're part of the Livestrong family. We want to be able to talk to you and give you all the resources that you need. But you can download the digital book there. Everybody can, right? So whether you want to share that with your friends, your caregivers, supporters, and then if you want the planner, so that would be something more like at the beginning of your journey. We talked a lot about, when we were planning for this panel, what does survivorship mean? And I even saw in the chat, like, one of you said, survivorship for me starts the day I was diagnosed. And at Livestrong, that's what we call survivors, right? And from the moment you're diagnosed, you're surviving, fighting and thriving. But so if you want a planner, which is more about your journey from kind of that day one, we can send you that as well for a very small fee. So you can see that too. So we also have tons of brochures around fertility and late stage cancer and late effects of cancer treatment as well.
Yeah. In addition to Livestrong, they have fantastic resources. If you're wanting to figure out, all right, Nikki, you said how important it is to start this template and to start this care plan. How do I find a template? So ASCO, which is cancer.net, actually has templates available for folks to develop a survivorship care plan and treatment plan. OncoLink, OncoLink.org has an OncoLife template for survivorship care plans that you can modify and start. The American Cancer Society also has linked templates. And then the NCCN, NCCN.org has clinical practice guidelines that patients can also look at so that you can see when you get through treatment and you get to survivorship, you can actually look and see what the doctors are supposed to know so that you can be informed and educate yourself and take that back to your physician and say, hey, on the NCCN practice guidelines, it says here that I'm supposed to be getting a mammogram and I'm supposed to be getting my thyroid checked, and I have a risk for cardiovascular disease and having a heart attack because I had Hodgkin's lymphoma and I had radiation and ABVD chemotherapy. Oh, and it's right there. So the NCCN .org guidelines and the survivorship care plans. They don't have care plans for every single cancer, but you could use one as a template. But that's a good place to start. The other thing we didn't mention, but I do want to just briefly talk about it, is any of you that might be childhood cancer survivors that are joining today, right? I do a lot of work with adolescent, young adult cancer survivors, and sometimes a childhood, someone who was 11, 12, 13, they don't have a place to go when they're 25 and they're having all of these late term effects, right? They need a tribe. They need that support system. And so they gravitate towards the AYA support program. So if you're a childhood survivor, really, really important to know the late and long-term effects. And you can go to the Children's Oncology Group, COG. They have survivorship templates, and there's also a long-term late effect study that St. Jude's, so stjudes.org, puts on for long-term and late effects for childhood. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just love how you guys are encouraging everyone to use their voice, be educated, speak up. It's so important to be your own advocate. One thing you just mentioned there, Nikki, was specifically for AYAs and kind of knowing their long-term risks, but I'd love to talk about, everyone in general. How do they empower themselves in survivorship to know their specific risks and kind of speak up and be cognizant of that if their doctor is not being, maybe mindful of that. Nikki, do you have any thoughts on that? And then we can go to Suzanne.
Yeah, well, again, education is power, right? You all have access, just like I do, to go to NCCN or to go to the American Cancer Society or have access I need to know for my disease and for my drug treatments or radiation treatments or surgical treatments that I have. You have a right to know what damage or what potential damage that's going to have later on in your life, right? I would start with NCCN, and you look at treatment guidelines, and it can tell you exactly where your risks are. So you have to first be informed, understand your disease, understand your treatments, understand what your risks are. Now, again, for blood cancers and information specialists, those of us, the master's degree or higher, please call an information specialist at lls.org, and we can walk you through that disease teaching. So that's one of the first things I would start. NCI, National Cancer Institute, cancer.gov also. So learn about your disease and then take that information where you're starting your care plan back to your oncologist and say, help me fill this in. Maybe it's a nurse practitioner that you've got a really good relationship with, right? Sometimes they have a little more time than the physician. And also your primary care doctor. So in the empowering part is, what do you do once you have this basic structure of this survivorship care plan? You have to, it's not okay to just have that in your purse or in your phone. You have to take that and communicate it with the provider themselves and say, look, go over this with me. This part doesn't make sense. What else do I need to know? Who else do I need to follow up with, right? It's an interactive didactic process to keep communicating with your physicians and asking those questions.
Awesome. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Suzanne, or?
I do. I have a couple. I'm gonna go weedy. That seems to be where I love to live. Nikki is she's a walking website encyclopedia over here. So thank you for that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this recording and make sure I have all of your resources as well. A couple things. I wanted to share with you. I mentioned earlier that I have this great, I love my job and I have an opportunity to talk to some really amazing entrepreneurs. And they're interested in sharing, they want to learn more about the cancer community. There's an app called Med Quarter, MED Quarter, Med Quarter. And it's really fascinating. It's a startup. He's out of California, but it's an app on your phone, and you, with your physician's permission, you can record the conversation that you're having when he comes in. But it does more than just that, because I could do that on my phone, right? Big deal. No, this transcribes it. And you set it up so that it sends the conversation to anybody on your list.
Wow.
So yeah, so the transcribed information is automatically sent to your care team, whoever that team is, your parent, your friend, your, whoever. So it's called Med Quarter. And how powerful. It's already transcribed. They're working on other prescription integrations as well. I would encourage you to check that out, because I think, Nikki, when we talk about all these little details, oh my God, right? I'm having surgery on my foot next month because I broke my toe. Super exciting. But I can't remember all the stuff that he told me about my toe, right? Forget what's happening with the drugs for cancer. I also want to touch really quick on what advice not to take, and how to say kindly to those sweet, amazing friends and caregivers who send you advice, Nicole, about what to do for your cancer that you would like to say what? That's so great. So I know that you're inundated with people who are very well-meaning, but they're saying, hey, so I heard that if you put magnets under your pillow and drink tea at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that has, this special spice in it, that it will kill your cancer. And so I think there's also a piece of this survivorship plan that's around how to communicate with your caregivers, right? And the people who mean nothing but the best for you, but you need to let them know in a kind way. And maybe Nicole, I'd love, you had some great insight on that, right? How do you tell people, hey, thank you so much for your support. This isn't the kind of support I need. I need you to put on your mask, and I need you to take me to the doctor at 2 o'clock on Thursday. That's what I need from you right now. Anyway, those are just my little grainy points on Nikki's big, giant, amazing picture of this survivorship plan.
And I think having really healthy boundaries is one of the best skills you can ever have for coping with cancer. And I mean healthy boundaries with your physicians, with your friends, with your loved ones, with your partner, about being able to say, this is what is helpful for me, and this is what is not helpful. Because we talked about this before, where people will demand that you go see their doctor, or they will demand, and they'll give you a book of information. They'll send you 15 articles on some herbal remedy or juicing or something that they need to go to Mexico because this is going to work. And it can be really exhausting when you're just trying to get through treatment or just trying to sort through what's important to you. And what I have found that works really well is acknowledging, like Suzanne did, thank you. I know you're scared. I know you're worried that you're going to lose me, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from a good place in their heart, but it's not helpful to me. As a matter of fact, every article that you send me causes me stress. And what would help is if you would come over and watch Netflix with me. That would help me. The emails don't help me, and the referral to your chiropractor does not help me. But what would help me is if you could take my kids out and go do something fun. What would help me is if you and your husband could maybe bring dinner on Wednesdays. That would be so helpful. Can anybody run to the grocery store for me, right? So have those things ready. Your responsibility as the patient is to kind of take a little bit of time and to know what you do need, and then ask for it, right? It's okay to ask for it. And I'm telling you, 25 years I've been doing this. The caregivers and those people that are the most intense about trying to tell you what to do to fix your cancer, right? Is they're looking for something to do to feel needed, right? And if you can provide them with something that makes them feel useful and makes them feel needed, it is a win-win, right? You have a need that gets taken care of, and they feel important, and they feel that they can't fix your cancer, but maybe they could go to the grocery store for you. So anyway, it's boundaries are hard. They take practice. It's like a muscle. You got to work it, and you got to practice it, but it can really make a huge difference in your recovery and in your relationships.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would agree. I know when I was going through treatment, just getting all of those resources, it did cause me anxiety because I felt like, oh, I need to go check these out because what if I'm not doing everything I can, right? But they may not have been very valid. I love a comment we have here from Noelle. She says, I would just thank them for their advice and say I'm adding it to my list of things to consider. I think that's a great approach. So you hear them, taking
Thank
it
you.
in, but maybe I just won't act on it right now. But I want to go back, Nikki. Something you said was, as patients, it's our job to identify what we need. I love that. I think that has ties to the broader survivorship plan too, because all these things we're talking about, right, is setting us up for a great quality of life, or as good a quality of life as we can have after treatment. I would love to, have everybody take just a minute and think about that. What do you value? What do you need? What do you want out of survivorship in your quality of life? Let's just take a minute here and think about that. And if you want to put it in the chat, please, we'd love to hear from you. Well, that's an exercise you certainly can do on your own. Take some time, think about what's important to you in your quality of life so that you can think about these things and prepare for it. I would love to turn to mental health now. Obviously, there's so many mental health challenges that go along with survivorship, from anxiety to, fear of reoccurrence to survivor guilt. So, Nikki, can we start with you? What are some suggestions for dealing with all these, differing feelings, and what might be some resources people could leverage?
Yeah, wow. That's such a huge and important category, and I know we've talked about that throughout this session. Is again going back to that taking personal responsibility, right, for your needs, and really taking a step back and asking yourself, how am I feeling? Where am I feeling this anxiety or this fear in my body? And where can I go to get help for that? I think that there's a couple of things that are really important, and that is if you are experiencing feelings of whether it's anxiety or survivor guilt, right? All the people that I was in clinic with are, 3 of them are gone and I'm alive, or, I had a good outcome, they didn't have a good outcome. Why is that? All of these, the emotional impact can linger for a really long time, but there's two things that I think about, and that is our human need that we are wired to be connected to each other, right? We are just hardwired to not be alone, and to have a community. So think about, like we talked about earlier, who in your circle can you talk to, right? Maybe it's time you need a therapist. Maybe it's time that reaching out for professional help could be the key. That could be the tool, that you are feeling heard and validated, and someone to help you sort through all of this mess that just may feel like a big jumbled mess. You don't even know how to pull out your feelings because it's all stuck together. So individual therapy, connecting through support groups or people that have a similar experience is super important. We have our LLS community, we have our peer-to-peer support programs, we have our moderated chats, right? We have all these other platforms, and I think Grit has Vivibot, right? You've got an app that actually takes people through coping and the emotional impact. All of those tools are available. You have to be intentional about seeking out that help and seeking out that connection.
Awesome. And thank you for the shout out to Vivibot for sure. She's on
She's
the Grit
cool.
Health website. Yeah,
Yeah, she's pretty
available
cool.
24/7.
Yep.
One thing that Lauren on our team says all the time is it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be, sad. We're talking about survivorship here in terms of, how to have a great quality of life, but it's not all roses. I mean, Suzanne, you said cancer sucks. It does. It comes with, a whole ton of things you have to deal with. Can you just, Suzanne, can you speak to that? Like validating your feelings. It's okay, regardless of how you're feeling.
Absolutely. And I also want to validate your choice. Quality of life is up to you. That's yours. We talk about fighting and surviving, and, you're like, all in, I got to cure this thing, I'm going to beat it. But, it's okay if you say, my quality of life is not okay right now. That is a personal decision. And it goes back to all of the amazing people in your life trying to heal you. What are the things, this is your life. You get to choose what you take into your body, what you do with your body, how you treat this cancer. So, my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer and she chose not to do anything about it. Now she could have, and we probably would have had her for a few more years, but she chose a different path. Her path was, she was unwilling to go through what they were asking her to go through and sacrifice what they were asking her to sacrifice. And wow, people I'm just using my personal story here, right? But people in my family got angry. How could you do that? You have to go do this. You have to have surgery. You have to have, 18 rounds of chemo. She's like, absolutely not. I do not. And she, what an amazing woman. She had her hair done the day she died. She was not interested in living, in that way. She chose what her quality of life was. And so I encourage all of you to say, hey, you know what? This is what these are the qualities in my life that are important. Understand what those are as you build your survivorship plan. If the things that are important to you are that you keep your hair, then figure that out. It doesn't matter if you feel vain for that. I have watched people go through cold capping. If you've seen that, oh my gosh, that's intense, right? Because hair was important, didn't care. She was going to go through it. It's amazing, right? And other people who've said, you know what, I'm just not going to take that drug. Maybe it gives me 5 more years, but wow, the side effects just aren't worth it to me. So when it comes to mental health, I feel like this is the most important time in your life to put yourself first and to think about what are the things that are important to me when I say I want a great quality of life, actually take a minute to journal those. What does that mean to me? And then make sure you're reflecting back on that as you're choosing your path, because you can get lost in the fight. You can get lost in that desire to heal. So what does healing look like to you? Be okay with that, and others have to deal with whatever that is for you. It's your life, it's not theirs. So let them deal with their journey, you're dealing with yours, and embrace whatever quality of life you choose. And therapy, I cannot recommend highly enough. There are lots of great resources out there. I saw lots of great mentions on the chat. There's some Facebook groups you can get into, lots of small nonprofits in your areas. I know that do some really great work online. Don't be afraid to get on camera and be vulnerable in those groups, and talk honestly to yourself about what you need and what's best for you in your life.
Oh, thank you. Such good advice. Nikki, do you have anything to add?
Oh, no, that was just perfect. And again, thinking about that this is your life, this is your decision, and you get to make the choices is really, really important. Yes, your family can have an opinion, but the bottom line is it's yours. And to not judge yourself, to be non-judgmental when you have certain values that come up there, or certain things that are really important. Don't attach a judgment of good or bad. It is what it is. And that's really important for you to identify those things that resonate with you, because you're living in your body, right? This is you that has to live with you, and to be congruent with your values is living wholeheartedly, right? And that's really important, to be authentic and to live wholeheartedly as we go through the cancer survivorship. And you cannot do that if you're constantly either judging or comparing yourself to somebody else's decision. Give yourself permission to call the shots.
Love it. Give yourself the grace that you would give a friend. And sometimes it's so hard to do that for yourself, but something we really need to do. Well, we are at about time, ladies. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Nikki. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share?
Stay connected. Again, I think all of us, we need each other. We need each other really badly right now during this pandemic and uncertainty and tragedy and disparities, that there's a lot of really terrible things going on in the world, and we need each other. We need to find meaning together, and we need to find hope. And so whatever that hope looks like for you, hold on to it. And I wish every single one of you the very, very best.
Yeah, I would say, anytime people email me or I have a chance to talk with them in any way, I say, welcome to the Live Strong family. You're not alone, Nikki, just like you said, you're not. And this is such a great, I thank Grit Health for continuing to push these conversations. And I also want to say thanks to this was not a paid announcement, but thank you to the sponsors, but really thank you to the people who made this possible, because this isn't free. It's not cheap. And I am so grateful that, and honored truly, to be on here and have an opportunity to interact on chat with all of you, and just to hear your voices, to see your words means so much. You're all out there fighting and thriving. And I'm really honored to be a part of that journey. So thank you for being here today and taking in, some time on your Saturday to be a part of this panel. Nikki, thank you for your encyclopedia of websites. And Nicole, thank you for sharing your journey too. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Appreciate it.